Hello, Garland Nixon here with Laith Marouf. Lots to talk about in West Asia. We got Israel's attack on Rafah. We've got things going on in Lebanon. Let's talk. Hello, all. Garland here with Laith Marouf. We're going to do our weekly update on what's happening in the region. Laith is right out of Beirut, so you're going to get really good information from someone who's on the ground in the region. Also, don't forget, he's got a great website, freepalestine.video. I actually got it right this week, freepalestine.video. I didn't screw that up for a change. It's important that you go there. They got a lot of really good work that they're doing. And of course, they need your help if you can afford it. Go to the freepalestine.video and donate. If you can't, don't worry about it. Just take care of your family. But what you can do to help is on all your social media platforms, share freepalestine.video, and above the, as a quote with your post, make sure you tell people to the importance of donating. It's an English. It is an English language website, and it's important that we get this out to the Western world. So it's freepalestine.video. Critical that you go to the site, that you share the site, that you donate, etc. All right, let's get rolling. Let's start here. Lebanon. I hear that it seems to be maybe increased military confrontations going on there. What's happening in Lebanon?
Yeah, so this morning, actually, Hezbollah attacked a base in the north of Palestine that was hosting a Zeppelin that's, a balloon attached to the ground that has all these surveillance equipment. And the Israelis brought out this balloon because all their frontline surveillance equipment has been destroyed by Hezbollah. And so what was amazing about this attack by Hezbollah is that they hit the base that is holding the balloon to the ground. And then they hit the command center where all the information from this balloon is processed. And then they finally, as this balloon was flying off, somehow downed it and captured all the surveillance equipment on this balloon. This is unheard of, obviously, and a huge loss for the Zionists, since that attack by Hezbollah has been back and forth bombardment on both sides of the border. And this comes after 2 days of dogfights in the air between Hezbollah drones and F-15s and F-16s. Imagine this. This is the first time we've seen in any battlefield in the world that because the Israelis are unable to shoot down Hezbollah drones, they have brought in the F-15s to chase these drones in the air. And the drones maneuvered in the mid of the air as they're being shot at by missiles from the F-15s and avoided being downed and reached their target. So the Israelis had to bring out the F-16s because, of course, some of our viewers don't know this, but F-15s are made for aerial bombardment and F-16s are made for aerial chases and fights in the air with other jets. And here was the F-16s. This is all recorded on video. The F-16s also failed to take down the drones of Hezbollah. And again, the drones of Hezbollah managed to outmaneuver them and hit their targets. This is an announcement now that Hezbollah has a full air force and also has full air dominance over the north of Palestine. This is a game-changing tactic, that an innovation by Hezbollah that I think is on par with the game-changing tactics of Ansarullah in terms of naval battle tactics, and with the Hamas's four-dimensional underground, overground battle, tactics for army, military, ground forces. So we have seen right now things that haven't been seen on any battlefield before. And as I was saying, since the morning, since the attack on that balloon, the Israelis did a mass bombardment on the south of Lebanon and many villages. And Hezbollah responded with a mass bombardment of Israeli bases in the Golan Heights. They had fired on the two main command bases in the Golan Heights, as well as the main radar and intelligence gathering base at the top of Mount Hermon in the occupied Golan. So we're now hearing that the Northern Command of Israel has decided to evacuate all the colonies in the Hula Valley. It's the valley between the Golan Heights and South Lebanon, or sometimes referred to as the Galilee Panhandle. So this shows you how serious the situation is. The Israelis lost control of the air over North Palestine, and they've now lost much of their bases and command centers in both the Golan and North occupied Palestine.
Wow, and I'm familiar, believe it or not, when people say the balloon, I'm very familiar with that. Not in an area of Maryland, not all that far from where I live, maybe 60 miles or so. It's called I can't think of it anyway. It's Aberdeen Proving Grounds, right? And it's a U.S. base, and they for a while, a couple years ago, and it's interesting you said Zeppelin because it looks like a Zeppelin. It's shaped like a Zeppelin, right? This gigantic balloon was in the air, and you could see it like from Baltimore, especially from the Key Bridge, and people were like, "What the hell is that?" This giant friggin' balloon, like up in the clouds, really, really high, and it was on the news, and people were like, "What in the world is this?" And then it was revealed that it was some kind of a U.S. government. They were testing this surveillance balloon Zeppelin thing. So I'm very familiar with what it is. With people, this is not just like a weather balloon. This thing is gigantic, shaped like a Zeppelin, and I mean it is way up there in the clouds. So interesting, and which means again a lot of stuff has been captured. But at any rate, okay. I mean, a very, very important intelligence equipment has been captured, and I'm sure that'll be in the hands of people who can figure out exactly what it is, and what data it has on it, what frequencies it's using, and on and on and on. That's a major hit. All right, I understand there was I read something about an ambush in, I believe it's Jabalia. What do we know about that?
Yeah, so the day that the Israelis announced, they're going to invade Rafah, that didn't actually happen. But what happened instead is that the Israelis did an attack on the north of Gaza in Jabalia region. And, this is a region that we were told Hamas was destroyed and all their battalions destroyed. And what ended up happening is that as this force was invading, it got caught in an ambush, and during this ambush, many Israeli soldiers were injured. And what we were told by the Israelis that a field general, meaning this is the highest commanding officer on the ground of any military force, a field general has been hit. They didn't tell us if he's dead or not, but his situation hasn't been updated since yesterday. Clearly, if you are hit a field general, he's surrounded by all his underlings and so forth. So this is a intelligence win, because Hamas managed to know where the command center of this invading force is, or where the vehicles that were carrying the commanders are, and hit them. And since yesterday, there's been an ongoing battle, and we saw Hamas release videos showing at least 10 different tanks being destroyed and APCs in this battle. So on the one hand, we see how Hamas is able to collect information and gather intelligence on the ground. On the other, we see that now Hamas has full capabilities in North Gaza to coordinate attacks, to send with these attacks camera persons to film those attacks and then bring them back to the command center, edit them, and release them to the media. So there is now we have proof that Hamas didn't lose any of its capabilities in the north of Gaza. And the fact that this battle now is continuing for more than 24 hours and the Israelis unable to move 1 inch forward and are still facing this resistance in a destroyed, emptied area like Jabalia, that means that there is no way that the Israelis can win this war. Anyone that had that illusion should take it out of their mind after seeing this battle in Jabalia.
Now, my understanding is that the Israeli, from their perspective, have bombed this area out. That it was just bombed out rubble. Everybody was gone. They killed anybody who was in Hamas. Anybody else was dead. That this basically, I think, my understanding was they were just going into a rubble destroyed area where nobody was, so they could just kind of walk in and set up as they pleased. It seems to me maybe through tunnels, maybe through hiding in the rubble, maybe they never left. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this? What this must mean to Israel to say we got this area, we bombed everything, let's move in, only to find out that Hamas is as strong as ever. And I don't know about as strong as ever, but certainly maintains a significant military presence in the area, able to repel if they came in. I'm sure the Israelis had a lot of soldiers coming in.
Yes, and so for a while now, the Axis of Resistance leadership has been telling us that Hamas only lost around 20% of its capabilities up until now. So now we have proof that that's true. Number two is some of the videos that were released showed Hamas fighters coming out of the ground just beside these tanks and firing at them these anti-tank missiles. So clearly the underground infrastructure that Hamas has not been harmed. Secondly, we heard 2 reports from Hamas saying 2 different tunnels were blown up with Israeli soldiers, since last night, attempting to enter these tunnels. So again, we have now proof that Hamas not only its infrastructure underground is still viable in the north of Gaza, but that they also even have surveillance in their own underground tunnels and are able to, use this surveillance to ambush any Israeli soldiers attempting to enter them. And finally, we can see that Hamas is still able to recruit. The more that the Israelis kill civilians, the more there is willing people to fight for Hamas to gain revenge for the martyrdom of their family members. Some of the videos we saw clearly the youth that are carrying this equipment and firing are young, that clearly they're not fully trained individuals. So we see an immediate absorption of new members into the fighting corps of Hamas. And I think the Israelis and the Americans, if they fought by genociding civilians, by killing women and children, that they will deter people from fighting back, they only had added more fuel to the fire that drives people to fight this Zionist colony. And right now, there's no way. Look, we're going to continue in this war. I know even last week some people were thinking that we're going to have a ceasefire or some kind of cessation of hostilities. But I looking at what's happening on the ground, I believe this war is going to be long. It may continue up till the American election. If it doesn't stop in November, it may continue to January, the commencement of the new president. If it doesn't stop then it's not going to stop for another 3-4 years. And it will be a war for, zero sum. Either the Zionist colony collapses or the Palestinian people are totally genocided. And this is where people need to set their mind correctly for this long war that we're just in the beginning of.
Well, it seems to me, under the circumstances, the Israelis and the U.S., the term goes, has a tiger by the tail. They can't hold on and they can't let go, because for Netanyahu to leave, to drop out means that he goes to jail, because let's face it, he's a crook. For Biden, he's 88% recent poll. Excuse me, 83% of Democrats, 70% of America as a whole, 56% of Republicans, 65% of independents. Overwhelmingly, America wants a ceasefire, immediate, and a cessation of hostilities. Americans want this thing over. But the problem he has is the billionaire Zionists in America that fund the crooked U.S. government. I'm not even going to call it a government. The U.S. criminal, crime family, because it's just an organized crime operation, right? The people who fund the crime operation don't want it. So our government, interestingly enough, is caught between the people, the illusion that they represent the American people, and the reality that they represent these billionaires, but that which is causing this illusion to evaporate with, of course, the college kids and all that. Your thoughts on that? The college students and the numbers that say the American people are not into genocide, but the government is.
Yeah, I mean, this is true across all of the Western countries. The majority of the population are against this genocide. The majority of the population wants to stop supplying Israel with weapons. And as we see, their elected officials are refusing to heed the will of the people. The students right now in the West are showing us the best example of what a citizen can do to affect their government, to listen to the will of the people. They are taking their bodies, their degrees, their future, and they're putting it on the line. They're risking being arrested. And as we saw during this movement, is that they forced the issue of Gaza and the genocide there into a local reality. And that's very important. It's very hard to mobilize people when the issue is very far away from your territory. But when it becomes a local issue, then now there is pressure, and everybody's, every student has a family, their parents, their uncles, their aunts, everybody's getting now affected by this story. And looking at how the police are handling these students, or mishandling them and abusing them, this is going to only trigger more reaction from the populace. I was watching in the Netherlands yesterday, the police beating up the students and the professors. It was unbelievable, the images, how violent they were. Of course, this has repeated all over the United States, but we're seeing also a movement right now growing within the professors, not only the students. For instance, in Canada, in the province of Alberta, the police were sent to shut down student encampments in the University of Calgary and the University of Alberta in Edmonton. And as a response to the abuse of the professors and the students there, the teachers union, the professors union in Canada, the TUC, has called on all universities to censor the University of Calgary and the University of Alberta. So now we have professors union saying that any university that calls the cops on campus should be censored, meaning no other university should do academic work with them, that their accreditation should be pulled away. So this is, we will start seeing that happening across Europe also. Maybe it's going to take a while for the United States, because the U.S. professors unions are very right wing. But in the Europe, we will see a similar moves. And if suddenly all these universities start losing their accreditation and their ability to conduct research with other universities around the world, the pressure will mount on them to actually, move along with the will of their students and their professors. So this is very significant things that are happening. We can't, just think of them as students and so forth. And as the summer now starts and these students leave their residences and go back to their towns and cities that they come from, they will be carrying this militancy with them to the streets. And that, this summer, I believe, will be a summer of discontent like in 1968, 1969. And the more repression we will see, the more activism will mushroom across the West.
I don't know if you heard this. This is important. Uh, 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 let me share this with everyone. I want to get your thoughts on it. An article. Oh, well, whatever the case, let's see, here we go. All right. Lindsey Graham suggests Israel should nuke Gaza. On Sunday, Senator Lindsey Graham suggested Israel should drop nuclear weapons on Gaza. When we were faced with destruction as a nation after Pearl Harbor, fighting the Germans and the Japanese, we decided to end the war by bombing Hiroshima, Nagasaki with nuclear weapons, right? Why is it okay for America to drop 2 nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and not Nagasaki to end their existential threat war? Why was it okay to do that? I thought it was okay. I want to get your thoughts on that. But you know what my immediate thought was? You were fighting, let's start here, Imperial Japan, which was a very, very powerful military power, right? Now you're telling us that a bunch of guys who have handheld weapons and RPGs, a bunch of guys who have small arms fire, and you've got an armada of ships, every kind of plane, satellite, you've got what? About 500,000, upwards of 500,000 Israeli soldiers. They're getting their butts kicked to a point where you're like, the only thing we can do is use nuclear. I mean, we all know it's absurd. They couldn't nuke themselves because Gaza, according to them, it's part of Israel. So, but just from the perspective of, you're talking about fighting Russia, Iran, or China, and you're getting your butts beaten so bad by a bunch of guys with small arms that you're like, we got to use nuclear weapons. It's kind of like, why don't you just hold up a surrender sign, a white flag at this point? It is, to me, it should be truly embarrassing to them. Laith.
Yeah, definitely, it's a sign of weakness. I mean, as you pointed out, there's, it's a small group of 25,000 fighters, most of them in flip-flops, carrying, handheld weapons, and they've held 500,000 Israeli soldiers into a standstill, and they're continuing to win. So yes, it's a sign of desperation. But also, we should be wary because Lindsey Graham is not the only one with these crazy ideas in their head. And the more desperate the Zionists get, and the more desperate the American empire gets, the more crazy reactions we will see. So, yeah, we've heard since the beginning of this war, the Zionists talk about nuking Gaza. And now we're hearing the American elected officials using that language. Partially it's to scare people, but partially is because they're so frustrated that all their military strategy and tactics have failed, and they cannot maintain their military presence in this area at this rate if this continues. So we're going to hear more of these howls by mad dogs as this war continues. And if in the next few days, as the Ansarullah in Yemen promised that they will be stopping all shipping to the Zionist colony through the Mediterranean, if we start moving, get to that stage, I think we will even hear more howls like this, and maybe howls like this to attack Yemen with nukes. Maybe they will try to say that attacking a different part of the axis of resistance with a nuke would be more viable because how Gaza is too close to the rest of the Zionist colony. So on the one hand, I understand that this is just scare tactics. On the other, where they're reaching the end of the list of tactical and strategic options that they have as an Americans. And I said from the beginning of this war, the Israelis and the Americans have been put in a quagmire. They only have two choices in front of them: admittance of defeat and exchange of POWs, which will lead to internal conflict in the Zionist colony in the United States, and or a zero-sum war with either Israel ceasing to exist or the Palestinian people totally genocided. And in fact, Netanyahu himself, just 48 hours ago, in a speech, said openly that ceasefire right now will be an admittance of defeat, and that Israel cannot sustain itself after a defeat of this magnitude. So Netanyahu himself is now telling the truth, that if Israel right now stops this war, it's an admittance of defeat, and they cannot withstand that admittance as a colony. It's that is built on this myth that it can provide safety to Jewish people better than any other place on this planet, would be destroyed. Therefore, all these colonists will go to places that are safer for them, where they can continue to live in privilege and such. So this is why we will not see a cessation of hostility anytime soon.
I got to add this too. It might have been David Cameron, one of the British former leaders or something, said, if we lose in Ukraine, then that's the end of Western hegemony. What's interesting about this is, I don't know if you've been paying attention to Ukraine. This thing's just about over. You know what I mean? The Russian military, historically speaking, it's not a wise to bet against the Russian military. If you're going to fight them on the Russian border, you probably ain't going to win that one. But the U.S. empire has put itself into two wars, both that they now say are existential. Yes, we can't possibly lose in Israel. If so, it's over. But they can't win it. Ukraine, we can't lose. It's the end of Western hegemony. We can't let Putin win, blah, blah, blah. They have two. And what's interesting is, in both wars, you have these Nazis in Ukraine who want to wipe out the Russian-speaking people at Eastern Donbass. You have, I could use the same word, but let's just say Zionists who want to wipe out the Palestinians. You have the exact same dynamics in both of these things. And both of them, they have come up against an opponent that historically says, you don't want to fight because you're not going to win. And both of them, they bet everything on two. It would be bad enough if they lost one or the other. There's no way they can win either one of them. This is a historical time of, 1,000 years or 500. You could go hundreds and hundreds of years. You can go back to, well, you could argue that this is a continuation of the conclusion of the, what do you call the attacks?
The Crusades.
The Crusades. At any rate, your thoughts on all of that, these two conflicts coming together?
Yeah, I mean, look, the Russians have been doing great, actually, and advancing very fast in the Kharkov front line. Right now, after President Putin won the election and put together his new cabinet, they're moving on the new plans. And we can hear the cries of Zelensky, reminding everybody that he wanted to have a large Israel. Please give us what you're giving to Israel. but it's too late. The West has moved all its reserves of extra weapons to the Israelis, and they built a bigger chain of delivery to the Israelis and to Ukraine. And on the ground, in the next few months, Ukraine may lose all of its coastline. I think that some of our viewers may know the connections between Ukraine and Palestine, but let's remind them anyways. First off, Palestine is part of the Syria region. The Queen of Russia used to say that the safety of Moscow is in Damascus. Anything that happens in Damascus is felt in Moscow. This is from the imperial days, and it's not because of nothing, or common love between Syrians and Russians or something like that. It's actual geographic reality. If there's trouble in the greater Syria region, there's trouble in south and east of Russia. And if there is trouble in the Ukraine, there is trouble in our part. This is historical, always repeating. Look, the Zionist project itself started in Ukraine. It was Ukrainian Zionists, that birthed Ukrainian Jews that birthed Zionism. It is the idea after when the Russian Empire cleared the Ottoman and the Turkic peoples from the coastline of the Black Sea in the north coastline, and then they moved all these Jewish Eastern Europeans to the south of Ukraine to settle it. That's when Zionism was born. They were like, oh wow, well we can settle and steal the land of other people on behalf of a empire. Well, we can do it then somewhere else on behalf of another empire, and that's how Zionism came to be. And so, the connections between the battlefield of Ukraine and the battlefield in greater Syria are timeless, and one affects the other. And now we see because Russia is aligned with Syria and the axis of resistance, this connection being even more solidified and more affecting of each of these things. So the more the resistance here in Western Asia and in the greater Syria region has successes, the more successes Russia will have in Ukraine. The more successes Russia has in the battlefield of Ukraine, the more possibility for liberation to happen here in Palestine and the greater Syria. One last thing I would say is that if Russia didn't come to the rescue of Syria in 2015, Syria would have fell to the Zionists. Can you imagine if there was no axis of resistance Syria today during this war of genocide in Gaza? What would have happened to the Palestinian people? There will be no supply line of weapons to the axis of resistance members in Lebanon. There would be actually Syria backing the Zionists and working with them to kill Palestinians, just like Jordan and Egypt and the Gulf countries are working. So that moment of 2015, when Russia entered the battlefield in Syria, is crucial to what is happening today in Palestine and what's happening in Ukraine. Because remember, again, imagine if Russia lost Syria in 2015 as an ally and lost its only hot water port, deep port in Latakia, how much it would be isolated in the Black Sea, and how much more playground and play space the West would have had to attack Russia, because it would be much more isolated within its borders with no backing in Western Asia. So these two things are intertwined. These two liberation movements, these two struggles are intertwined. And a victory for Russia is a victory for the Palestinian people, and a victory for the Palestinian people is a victory for Russia.
What are your thoughts on Egypt joining South Africa in the ICC case against Israel, the genocide case?
You know, I think of it as theatrics. Remember, up until now, the ICJ is really did nothing, but and is clearly saying that there will be years before a decision is made. And look at what's happening on the ground in Egypt. Over the last 2 days, there's been multiple demonstrations by students in universities in Egypt. And they had set 3 demands, these students in the universities. One is to give financial aid to Palestinian students stuck in Egypt that have no money being sent to them from their families because of the genocide that's happening in Gaza, that these students are starving. They can't go back anywhere. They can't work. They're not allowed to work. And they can't even pay their fees. So students, Egyptian students, asked their universities to give financial aid to Palestinian students stuck in Egypt. The second thing that they asked for is for Egypt to condemn the attack on the Rafah border crossing and the Philadelphia axis, because that is part of the Camp David agreement between Israel and Egypt, that the Israelis are not allowed to occupy the Philadelphia axis, the border between Gaza and Egypt. And the final ask that they had is for their universities to boycott products that are supportive of the Zionist colony. The response of the Egyptian government was midnight raids on the homes of these students with their families, ransacking the homes, rounding up these students and beating them up and bringing them in front of a court in the middle of the night, charging them with membership in terrorist organizations and remaining them under custody for the next 15 days until the court commences the court proceedings. And this coincided at the same moment as the Egyptian government put this request to be an intervener in the case of South Africa versus the Zionist colony. So that shows you that actually Egypt, as a vassal state, seeing the heat on it on the ground, needed to do some symbolic gesture that will be carried by international media, meaning this symbolic gesture of adding itself as an intervener to kind of appease its population and distract away from the fact that it is right now impotent. The Egyptian army is like castrated. Okay, it's like eunuchs. That's what the Egyptian army is right now, because they don't even dare say anything to the Zionists or for breaches of international law and the Camp David agreement. And they're sitting back and letting it happen. And they are arresting their own students, abusing their own students for even not. The students didn't say anything against the Egyptian government. They didn't criticize the Egyptian government. They asked their own universities to do things that are also very symbolic, very easy to do. Give financial aid to the Palestinian students, cut the Coca-Cola from the campus, whatever it is. It's not the students themselves were too scared to even criticize their government. But look at how their government reacted. And this is why I think, in a way, this ICJ intervention by Egypt is just a hot balloon, air balloon, and it's just a waste of time and a distraction from the reality of what's happening inside Egypt.
What about the vote on Palestinian statehood, or the votes in the EU recently, which, again, there's a lot of symbolism, and there may not be any meat to these things, but it also does demonstrate how isolated the U.S. is. Your thoughts on that?
Yes. You are right. It has meaning. It's not totally empty. At least the momentary propaganda win that the Palestinians have achieved by this. But you look at the states that voted for the membership of Palestine in the United Nations General Assembly, the vast majority of them actually already acknowledge Palestine as a state and have embassies for Palestine and or embassies in Palestine. The few that voted for but don't have a full acknowledgement of Palestine as a state themselves are still refusing to do so. So we saw France, for instance, vote for accepting Palestine as a member of the United Nations, but is still refusing as a state itself, which it doesn't have to wait for the UN. It can, as a state, France, to acknowledge Palestine as a state and open embassy for Palestine. So in a way, you see that specifically countries in the West that have huge Arabic and Muslim populations, like France, who are feeling the most heat in terms of disturbances within their populace around this issue of the genocide in Gaza, were allowed by their master in Washington, D.C., to vote in support of Palestine becoming a state at the United Nations because it's irrelevant, because it's not changing anything, because it's going to go back to the Security Council and the United States is going to veto it, because France is not really acknowledging Palestine as a state. Therefore, in a way, it was theatrics. And I have a lot of hate for the Palestinian Authority and Mahmoud Abbas. And part of this theatrics that we saw was to give some legitimacy to Mahmoud Abbas and his diplomats in the UN by doing this vote, taking some attention. I mean, but in reality, the Palestinian Authority spent probably millions of dollars to get their ambassadors, to talk to other ambassadors, to move these countries to vote and so forth, into nothingness, while the Palestinian Authority is collaborating with the Zionists on the ground in the West Bank on a daily basis in the oppression of the Palestinians and the Palestinian resistance.
Yeah. Let me ask you this about the students and this is I went on people gave me a hard time about it, but I went on this radio talk show with some goofballs. I don't know if you saw it, but these goofballs in the UK, and I mean, it was just, I mean, mindless prattle, you know what I mean? And I just went on because every now and then I like to throw a couple punches, right? So I got in there and just threw some punches. And but what's interesting is this. They like just use the same word over and over. Anti-Semitism. There were times when they didn't even say anything but anti-Semitism. What about all this anti-Semitism? No context of what they were saying. No reference to anti-Semitism here, anti-Semitism there. Just anti-Semitism, anti-Semitism, right? And what's interesting is this. In the United States, there was this conversation going on, the conservatives. There's no racism. There's no discrimination, for years. There's no racism in America. There's no discrimination anywhere in America. There's anti-Semitism everywhere. And you know who the most anti-Semitic people are? The Jews, right? All of these Jews that are running around saying, I'm against this. I'm opposed to what Israel's doing. I'm opposed to Zionists, right? And so it's like these anti-Semites on college, and they're running around with like yarmulkes on, having seders on the street and all of this. It's interesting watching them just scream out the word anti-Semitism. And it's like, let's just keep saying this over and over again to the point where it's becoming laughable. It's becoming obvious that they like have nothing to say but anti-Semitism, to the point where they're hurling it at Jewish people, where Congress is trying to pass a law that says opposing Israeli violence, opposing Israel foreign policy, opposing Zionism is anti-Jewish violence and anti-Jewish hatred. So we got Jewish people now accused of anti-Jewish violence and anti-Jewish hatred. Your thoughts of how this rhetoric is becoming so unhinged and just absolutely laughable. It's so absurd. I mean, the desperation it shows.
Yeah, I mean, look, for years now, we've been hearing the right in the West attack the snowflakes of
Yeah,
the left and their
you want a safe
feelings.
space on college, right?
Space on college, attacking this idea of identity, politics, and then now we see that the champions of safety on campus and safe spaces and protecting feelings and identity politics are actually the extreme right. It's unbelievable. But sometimes you can't stop yourself from laughing. Uh, but it is like lunacy. It's crazy. It's really crazy how and what's crazier is that you go to the feed of these people on their Twitter or whatever social media that they're using, and you see one tweet that they would do attacking identity politics and feelings and safe spaces, and then right after it, defending identity politics of Jewish people and feelings and safe spaces. So these contradictions are an actual indicator of collapse. You've got now individuals that cannot recognize the contradiction of what they're saying within minutes. They're contradicting themselves. Okay, so on the one hand, it's an indicator of intellectual collapse. On the other, it's of an indicator of those who don't have mental problems, that they're actually being disingenuous and being hypocrites. And so, in any case, this is exposing the state and the power dynamics that exist, how the media works, how the electoral system works, and it's exposing all the fake mechanisms that are there, that people think there is a democracy or whatever, but there isn't. People think that there's freedom of speech. There isn't. And I think this law that you mentioned, the scariest part about it is, okay, there've been already laws in Canada and the UK and Europe calling anyone that criticizes Israel as an anti-Semite, but now this new law that the United States is putting forward will charge these students with belonging to a terrorist organization. It will put them on no-fly lists. It will take a hold of their bank accounts. I mean, this is now a different stage, okay? And if this comes into effect, if it's passed by Congress, oh Lord, there's going to be mass incarceration. There's going to be concentration camps,
Yeah,
internment camps for people who stand with Palestinian liberation, whether they're Palestinian, Arab, Muslim, or whatever their background they come from. If they stood for Palestinian liberation, they may find themselves in internment camps. And so I warned about this 7 months ago. I said, look, we're going to get there. But I didn't think that it will be this fast, that things will deteriorate in terms of implementing laws. Maybe I thought, okay, we'll get nasty on the streets, but I didn't think that they will get to this moment of trying to pass these laws that legalize internment camps this fast. And so we didn't even see American soldiers come back in coffins yet, and we're already at this stage. So if they pass this law, and then the American soldiers come back in coffins, God save the American people from their own government.
let me show you. For those of you who didn't see it, what we were arguing about, and get your take on it. What we were arguing about was basically they were talking about the students as extremists, blah blah blah. And I said, well, wait a minute. If 70% of Americans want a ceasefire, then the students are mainstream. They're not extremists, and they couldn't handle it. They just like, no, no, you know what I mean? I'm like, yeah, we got polls right. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at my little. I think it really infuriated them because you know me, I'm always happy. What burned them up was that I was laughing the whole time because it's just who I am. Let's take a look. Garland Nixon here, and I'm with James the Whale, and God only knows who this other guy is, going around in circles with these clowns. The issue was I brought up a poll: 70% of Americans, all Americans, want a ceasefire, and they were like unhappy with it. Let's
James
go.
the Whale and George the Sea Cow.
Yeah.
No, don't smile.
No,
this is a
I'm
serious
just
subject.
correcting you.
Don't smile.
I'm just correcting you. You
No,
said
you're not.
nobody
We were talking about protests here, weren't we, you
you're the one.
buffoon? We were talking
You're
about
the one that
protests
said
here.
no one is protesting against those wars. I just had to correct you that
But
someone
they're
is.
not, are they? What universities are protesting against these wars?
There's nobody in Britain
Like, you got something
protesting
to say, have you?
against the Ukrainian war.
Silence.
Nobody.
Silence.
Okay, but my point is
He's
still
thinking.
stands the same.
Thinking.
I believe, number one, that the protesters are in the mainstream. They're not extremists here. Let's not pretend that they're some kind of extremist.
Why do you think
Those
that? What are you
who
basing that on?
Numerically speaking, those who oppose a ceasefire,
So I
an immediate
totally disagree
ceasefire,
with
are
you.
the extremists from a numerical perspective.
I totally
That's
disagree
inarguable.
with you. I totally disagree
It's
with you.
inarguable. The numbers argue against what you're
totally
saying.
disagree with you.
Well,
Let's
you
leave
can,
it
but
there.
70%
We'll
is
agree
much
to
more than
disagree.
30% the last time I checked.
But
Yeah.
what should they do with the ceasefire then? What happens next in Gaza?
Depends where you check, by the way. I
What
suppose
happens?
you get your facts from Hamas, a terrorist organization.
I loved how he held his buddy's arm down. He was getting so angry. He was going to get physical with his friend
Yeah, he was
because
going to reach through the camera and give you one
he
point.
couldn't reach you and choke you, you know.
But all they could say in the face of polls was, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. You don't got to believe it. And so I just said, hey, last time I checked, 70's higher than 30, buddy. You lose. Where do you get your facts from, Hamas? They lost control, it seems like to me. Like they just started babbling. They didn't have an argument. And this is kind of representative of this whole thing.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And now, you know, because it's very clear that they lost the will of the majority of the people, that they lost the intellectual battle, they lost the media battle, they lost the ground actual military battle. And now we see them saying that they want to move back to, rule by lords. You know, they're telling you openly that they believe that the majority of the population are unable to comprehend things, and therefore that the leaders should take decisions on their behalf because we're now going to become wards of the state, like slaves were, or like women or indigenous people were in the 1800s. This is what we're going to. So we're not even going from, theatrical democracy to, I don't know, dictatorship. No, we're going to go back to the lords and the serfs situation with mass media telling you that, hey, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm going to tell you. And if you don't listen, I'm going to take you off and put you in an internment camp. This is how ridiculous things are. We laugh about them. We have to laugh. There's nothing else we can do but laugh at them. But it is dangerous days ahead for everybody in the West. I worry about my brothers in Canada. You know, I'm gonna go back this summer, like every summer. I don't know if the Canadian government is gonna round me up as I come off the plane. But I'm a Canadian citizen. Let's see what happens. I have to visit my family. But I'm really worried about my brothers in Canada and my wife's family in the United States. I'm more worried for them than I am worried for Arabic people in the region here. And I'm not saying this, out of nowhere. I'm genuinely worried for the students in the U.S. and Canada and the West. I'm worried for all good-willed people that want equality for, and they want peace for everybody. One thing, peace right now is a indicator that you could end up in an internment camp. This is how crazy the situation is. Being, as you said, like just calling for peace is now considered an extremist position. by these politicians. So everything else, of course, is an extremist position to them that is more to the left of just ceasefire.
Yes, you're right. Well, once again, everybody, that we've been speaking with Laith Marouf. Laith is a journalist based out of Beirut. Make sure you go to his website, freepalestine.video. It's critical that you go there. It's critical that it's an English language, local, but yet international website and project where they're getting the information that's going on in the region out in an English language. It's critical that people in the West find out what's happening from the people that are there, that are standing up along with the, I'm not going to say standing up with the resistance, but their own form of resistance of, but through honest journalism. And we definitely need that out of the region. Freepalestine.video. When you go there, it's important that you donate. If you can't afford to donate, which is fine. A lot of people are just trying to make ends meet. You do have all your social media platforms. Share freepalestine.video on your social media platforms, and just put a little note for everyone, telling them, commending them to donate as they're able to. Freepalestine.video. It's a very, very important website. Once again, don't forget, share this video on all your social media platforms. Thank you very much. If you're not a member, make sure you subscribe to my channel here on Rockfin and on Rumble. Peace. We're out.